Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kirk, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're talking about my Week 11 wide receiver rankings for the 2021 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about all things related to the wide receiver position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format, in order to give you some more perspective as to who has the most advantageous matchup and how that is potentially going to affect a wide receiver's upside going into this upcoming week. After we talk about matchups for this upcoming week, I of course am going to go ahead and display the statistics for the rest of season strength of schedule at the wide receiver position, giving you guys some perspective as to which wide receivers perhaps you should be going out and trading for prior to your deadlines. I know many of you guys had reached out saying that your trade deadlines are this upcoming weekend, so I wanted to kind of give you guys an update regarding that, like I did similarly yesterday on the running back video. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to do so. Outside of that, we'll of course then transition to our top 36 wide receiver rankings for week 11, and of course give you guys my perspective and opinion and the statistics that justify my reasoning as to how I think the wide receiver position is going to stack up when it's all said and done at the end of week 11. Before we begin today's video, I want to thank you guys for continuing to support the channel. For those of you who are new here, be sure to subscribe. We are on our way to, of course, 60,000 subscribers. We're very close to surpassing 57K. So if you have not yet already and you're trying to win yourself a 2021 fantasy football championship, click the subscribe button down below, and of course click the bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content, whether it's live streams, videos, all of the above. You'll be notified when it's officially out. Outside of that, of course, if you guys haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy, it's another way to play fantasy football, whether it is weekly contests on Monday, Thursday, Sunday night. Of course, getting yourself in the fantasy football mix, even outside of your own respective team leagues. Now, of course, the season-long leagues, they're a marathon, but you can go ahead, draft a new team every single week and find success and win some money. For those of you who are interested, you can go ahead and use promo code Andrew today. If you go down to the link in the description, click on the link, use promo code Andrew, and Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. Extremely generous offer. Again, that's promo code Andrew for those of you who are interested in playing fantasy football the Underdog way. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into our Week 11 wide receiver rankings. But of course, talking about matchups at the position, because you all know how much value I put into matchups. The singular one-on-one matchup between a wide receiver and a cornerback, it may be looked at as something that is minimal, but to be honest, it could play a huge factor in the entire performance of a player. If a team's safeties are always sitting too high and they're going to never allow somebody like Tyreek Hill or perhaps Tyler Lockett to beat them over the top, then of course the value is going to be diminished. And there's often cases that we've seen throughout the entire season in which wide receivers disappear in specific matchups. Of course, we'll address all of that. Let's begin by showing you guys the statistics for this upcoming week. As of thus far this season, through the first 10 weeks of the year, we have seen the wide receiver position allowed these points by opposing defense. So again, this is how many points defenses have given up to opposing wide receivers thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. The Tennessee Titans and the Washington football team, they have been at the top of this list for the last 3 weeks consecutively and are continuing to be one of the worst teams in terms of their overall coverage against opposing wide receivers. Oftentimes, these teams either struggle because they're winning and teams have to throw against them late, or they just can't cover because their secondaries haven't played up to their expectations. They're dealing with injuries, etc. Either way, when we play against the Tennessee Titans, Washington football team, we have the Miami Dolphins, Chicago Bears, Indianapolis Colts. These are the defenses we certainly want to go after, especially teams like the Colts. They've given up 15 receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this season already. And as we continue to progress down this list and look at some of the tougher matchups, you go to the very bottom. The Buffalo Bills have only given up 3 receiving touchdowns. That's going to be tough for someone like Michael Pittman Jr. this upcoming week, but it's not impossible. Though it could be a difficult matchup, I'm often playing my studs into those matchups regardless, because they are good enough, in my opinion, to get the opportunity and then, of course, succeed on said opportunity and put forth a great overall performance. Either way, just wanted to show these statistics, break it down via targets, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points per game scored against these respective defenses. But either way, now that we've kind of approached this, I will transition to the rest of season strength of schedule in order to give you guys more perspective as to what we can expect for the rest of the year and which wide receiver cores have the overall most expected fantasy points that they are going to potentially score for the rest of the season. So if you look to the bar to the very left, wide receiver weeks 1 through 11, I went ahead and calculated by the rankings and the points given up to opposing wide receivers thus far this season on average in a half PPR amongst the rest of the teams and the rest of the schedule from weeks 11 through 17, and found that the wide receivers of the Philadelphia Eagles have the highest expected fantasy points per game that they're going to score. So they have the easiest matchups going forward, followed by the 49ers, Green Bay Packers, Las Vegas Raiders, Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is something that I talked about the other day in a video in which I talked about the rest of the season strength of schedule. If you guys want to check that out, it's right up here. and it gives you a little bit more details as I kind of give more of a analysis and breakdown of every single major team or major player that may be undervalued that you might want to go after. Outside of that, you could check that video out. I'm not going to go into extreme detail right now. In terms of the wide receivers weeks 15 through 17, the fantasy football playoffs, for those of you who perhaps have already clinched a playoff position, perhaps you have 8 or 9 wins already throughout the first 10 weeks, you may be looking to go ahead, pick up some players or trade for players from these respective teams in order to give yourself an advantage in the fantasy football playoffs. Of course, Deebo Samuel, DeVonta Smith, Diontae Johnson. These are some of the wide receivers, perhaps even Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, that are going to go ahead and take over the league based on those matchups in the fantasy football playoffs. Of course, let's not forget Jaylen Waddle from Miami, CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of great wide receivers there, and maybe some that you should be looking for potentially going after. All right, now that we've covered that for week 11, we'll go ahead and we'll transition to our rankings at the top 36 level, beginning with our top 12. Do not forget, rankings are always subject to change. As the week progresses, a variety of injuries are going to plague our teams and potentially these players, whether it is respective wide receivers or even matchups against respective cornerbacks. If a top stud cornerback isn't going to be playing for a team, then by all means, a wide receiver will certainly get an upgrade going forward. If you want to stay up to date on my latest rankings, you can go ahead and check out my Patreon down in the description of the video, or check out the live stream Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kick off with Kirk, as I'll have my top 36 wide receiver rankings for a half PPR up to date and ready to go by then, for those of you who are interested. Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and let's get into this, shall we? Our top 36 wide receiver rankings on the week. Number one has been Cooper Kupp for the last couple weeks here, but he is on a bye week along with the wide receivers for the Denver Broncos. Of course, many of us who have Cooper Kupp will be suffering this week, but hopefully we can go ahead and manage and survive. Beginning with our number one, Davante Adams makes his way back to the top of the list at the wide receiver rankings for us. Again, he has been such a great wide receiver over the last couple of years, but unfortunately, in terms of his overall consistency of play this season alone, yes, he missed that 1 week. He came back this week, 7 catches on 11 targets, 78 yards. It's been underwhelming, but typically when he has underwhelming performances, he turns it around and has himself really good games on the immediate game right after, especially with Aaron Rodgers under center. Either way, I think the matchup alone, playing against Minnesota, is as easy as it possibly can get for him. In the last 8 games that Davante Adams has played against the Minnesota Vikings, he has had at least 100 receiving yards or a receiving touchdown in every single game. Some of the performances as of late: 26.8 fantasy points, 34.6, 16.1, 15.4, 16.4, 14.1. The dude has dominated against this defense year over year. Patrick Peterson doesn't look like he's returning anytime soon. And unfortunately for Minnesota Vikings fans, Davante Adams may be having himself a very explosive week here in week 11. Moving on to Tyreek Hill, our number 2. Tyreek Hill has as much upside as any other wide receiver, and perhaps the highest upside every single week, as we've seen him have 30-plus point performances multiple times throughout this season and his career. These are things that are going to happen. Coming off a week in which he had 7 catches, 2 in which were receiving touchdowns, shouldn't be a surprise. When you don't really need to punch the ball in down on the goal line, you can use the threat of a Darrell Williams and or a Travis Kelce on the goal line to kind of distract defenses. Tyreek Hill just kind of sneaks his way past defenders, which you would think probably wouldn't be the case, but hey, he does it anyway, finds himself open oftentimes. Now that Patrick Mahomes has gotten back to being Patrick Mahomes, 400 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, I think the sky's the limit. This game overall, in terms of this upcoming week between the Dallas Cowboys and Kansas City Chiefs, in terms of the Vegas over-under, it has the highest implicated overall total. I think it's about 55.5 points, 56 points. This is going to be a shootout. We all know that the Dallas Cowboys secondary isn't the greatest. Bend but don't break. They don't give up too many touchdowns, but yardage is certainly there. But we all know Tyreek Hill's a touchdown machine. He'll probably find himself in the end zone this week. Moving on to Stefon Diggs, our number 3, had himself an incredible performance, and hopefully this is going to be the turning point in which he gets back on track and continues to have these 100-yard games. Again, 8 catches, 162 and a touchdown. Certainly is a great performance against the New York Jets of all defense, but now he takes on the Indianapolis Colts. Again, I've talked about it. They have given up 15 receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this season already. On top of it, they have given up 14 different performances of 70-plus receiving yards to opposing wide receivers. This defense has not played well at all this season. I think Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs, that's the number 1 and 2 combo of that entire offense. And as long as they're on the same page, they are going to be extremely successful going forward, especially in such a great matchup against Indianapolis this week. Moving on to A.J. Brown, the thumbnail, our number 4. Listen, A.J. Brown versus the Houston Texans is as good as it could possibly get. It's almost as good as Derrick Henry versus the Houston Texans. For some reason, the Tennessee Titans just have the Houston Texans number, especially when it comes to throwing the ball to number 11. I mean, when we think about what A.J. Brown's probably going to be able to do this week, if he ends up as the number 1 wide receiver, I won't be surprised. Mainly because, again, there's no Derrick Henry, there's no Julio Jones. Marcus Johnson had himself a good week. We saw a couple tight ends score over the last couple weeks, but A.J. Brown's going to be the pivotal point and the mainstay of this offense every single week. And though he did fall off last week and didn't find much success with only 1 catch, they ended up still winning. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit more explosivity this week and more upside. The last 4 times that he's played against the Houston Texans, 21.4 points, 20.4, 20.3, 26.1. He has literally never had a game in his career of less than 20 points against Houston. And I don't expect this to be the week in which it changes. Moving on to Deebo Samuel, our number 5. This man has been absolutely incredible. I mean, not only is he the number 2 overall wide receiver in fantasy football in terms of fantasy points per game scored, I think he's averaging in a half PPR about 18.7 points per game. Those kind of numbers are unbelievable. And the performance he just had on Monday night against the Rams just continues to just grow his overall legend this season. I mean, the wide receiver 1 performances this man has already put up this season, the fact that he's coming off of a game in which he got a lot of work out of the backfield. Guys, he ran the ball 5 times for literally 36 yards and a rushing touchdown. And this upcoming week, if there's a potential that Elijah Mitchell is not going to play, then by all means, of course, Jeff Wilson's going to be back there, but why not use Deebo Samuel again, considering how much success they found on those 5 given runs? If this man's going to be averaging, over 5 yards per carry every time he's given the ball, then of course he's going to be far more implemented in the backfield. We always know that they want to use him as a gadget player and use him in the backfield. They've done that over the last couple of years, but now they've really leaned into it. He's such an explosive player, has so much upside, and this 49ers team, really healthy now with Kittle back, with Jeff Wilson back, at least has more depth. The offensive line looks clean. Trent Williams was dealing with injuries earlier this year. Jimmy Garoppolo obviously missed some time. If they're full go, by all means, this is a great play against Jacksonville, one of the easiest matchups of the week. CeeDee Lamb is our number 6. CeeDee Lamb had himself a fantastic game against the Atlanta Falcons defense, but to be honest, every single Dallas Cowboy pretty much had a great game until it was just garbage time, and the rest was history. Nonetheless, CeeDee Lamb is coming off of a game in which he had 6 catches, 94 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, 25.6 fantasy points. The biggest takeaway that I see going into this upcoming week, and from what we kind of can gather from last week, is mainly his snap percentage in the slot position. With Michael Gallup back, Michael Gallup is pretty much playing the outside while CeeDee Lamb has gone back into the slot. This is where exactly he played in the beginning of the 2020 season, where he found and caught fire with Dak Prescott, and they were finding so much success. If you are going to put CeeDee Lamb in the slot position, similar to some of these other wide receivers like a Tyreek Hill or a Cooper Kupp, who just dominate there, because oftentimes it is extremely difficult to double a wide receiver in the slot position, especially when you have outside threats like Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Schultz over the middle, and a running game with Ezekiel Elliott and that incredible offensive line. CeeDee Lamb continues to just get better and better every single week. His opportunities continue to grow. And I think against Kansas City, which should be a shootout, should be a great overall play as a number 6. Moving on to Jamar Chase, coming off the bye week as our number 7. Jamar Chase takes on the Las Vegas Raiders. And though the Las Vegas Raiders have been one of the better secondaries in the National Football League, they're not immune to giving up points to number 1 wide receivers. We've seen Tyreek Hill 7 catches, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns against that defense. Of course, this last week, a couple weeks back, Cortland Sutton, 8 catches, 94 and a touchdown. The Las Vegas defense can give up points. And I think if anybody's going to score them at the wide receiver position for the Cincinnati Bengals, it is certainly going to be Jamar Chase, considering how much success he has already found this season. Now, unfortunately, the last time we saw Jamar Chase prior to his bye week, he had himself an underwhelming performance. It was actually the first game in his NFL career in which he had less than 10 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Imagine that. The guy had to go 9 weeks to finally have himself a dud performance. Outside of that was 10 plus points every single week. In that game against the Cleveland Browns, in which, of course, the game went completely out of hand and in the opposite direction, we certainly did see some opportunities that Jamar Chase had. Oftentimes, with targeted in the red zone, an interception would happen. A defensive pass interference would happen. As long as the opportunities are going to be there, there's a lot of confidence to be had with Jamar Chase. That is why he's our number 7. And is honestly the number 1 target in that offense. And an offense that's quite potent and scoring a lot of points. Moving on to Justin Jefferson, our number 8. His former teammate at LSU. Both these guys have been playing fantastic this year. But, going back to last week, at this exact moment where I was talking about Justin Jefferson in last week's video, I was talking, he's not getting enough opportunities. If he's not given said opportunities, can we really trust him at a higher level? And fortunately enough, later in the week, we heard some rumblings that Kubiak, the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, had said, we are not giving, Justin Jefferson the ball enough. We need to go ahead and address that and get him the ball more. And by all means, they did. 11 targets, 9 catches, 143. The 2 incompletions were both defensive pass interferences. Otherwise, this man is catching every single ball. He absolutely played out of his mind. Takes on Green Bay this week, though in the past has not found a lot of success, specifically looking back to last year. But that mainly has to do with the fact that Jair Alexander was active. He's not coming back this week. This is going to be an incredible game for Justin Jefferson. Chris Godwin's our number 9. I know Chris Godwin was plagued with an injury all of last week, and there's a potential that he could also be missing some time this week at practice due to said injury, but there's a couple factors that kind of have me excited for his potential this week. Number 1, he plays against the Giants. Now, I'll explain to you the reason. Though they've only given up the 18th most points to wide receivers, they cannot stop opposing slot wide receivers, beginning with Renfrow, 7 catches, 49 and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill, 12 catches, 94 and a touchdown. Cooper Kupp, 9 catches, 130 and 2 touchdowns. The slot wide receiver in their last couple matchups, they just can't stop them. They cannot. And luckily for Godwin, he's going to be in that slot position and getting a lot of targets, even in an injured week in which he didn't practice for the majority of the week. Had himself 8 targets, 7 catches, 57 yards. Now, the information that was kind of divulged to us as of this morning via Antonio Brown was that he began running today. He was in a boot for the last couple weeks, and though he is beginning to run today, doesn't mean he even plays this week, much less practices. And we know what to expect when we have a healthy Chris Godwin with no AB on the field and in a good matchup. That's why he's our number 9. Moving on to number 10, we have DK Metcalf. Again, DK Metcalf, last week, extremely underwhelming, but Russell Wilson was working through the kinks. It was obviously a weather game. It wasn't a weather game to where it would impede his overall production, but either way, the thing that I wanted to first and foremost mention regarding DK Metcalf is that this season already, he has the 27th most receptions amongst all wide receivers. Now, you may be wondering, is that actually a high number, Andrew? No, it's not. It's really not great. He has only 42 receptions this year. In comparison to a lot of other wide receivers, I think he's tied with DeVonta Smith, who's a rookie. But with that said, again, Russell Wilson's been out for a couple weeks here. Nonetheless, he's ranked number 19 in wide receiver receiving yards. Is that great, Andrew? No, that's also not great. He's at about a 606. In terms of receiving touchdowns, he has 8 this season, and he's ranked 3rd amongst all wide receivers. Because of those touchdowns, DK Metcalf has been a reliable wide receiver option. It is safe to say he is touchdown dependent. And if he's not scoring touchdowns, especially against the defense like the Arizona Cardinals, then we could see some potential problems going into this weekend's games. Now, luckily for him, he takes on the Arizona Cardinals, who have given up 13 receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this season already. The Indianapolis Colts have given up 15. The Tennessee Titans have given up 14. And they've given up the 3rd most receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this season already. Obviously, the yardage hasn't been there, but hopefully, in a matchup in which, of course, Russell Wilson's more comfortable with based on the history against that team, we could maybe see DK Metcalf get back on track and get Russell Wilson back on track, because that is the key as to whether or not he's going to have the upside week. If he can get it done with Geno Smith, I'm pretty sure Russell Wilson will come back down to earth and end up getting DK Metcalf some upside fantasy points. Moving on to number 11, we have Mike Evans. Now, here's the thing about Mike Evans. He's pretty much scoring touchdowns every week. I think, what's the stat? 7 touchdowns in the last 5 games. As long as that continues to happen, he's obviously starting for our team, because he's pretty much solidified a baseline of getting himself like 12 points per game. Anything else is just upside gravy, and we're just going to take that every single week. And that's typically what we've seen, because, of course, there hasn't been a Gronkowski and there hasn't been Antonio Brown in the lineup. So going into this upcoming week's matchup against the New York Giants defense, though Chris Godwin probably is going to be the featured wide receiver, I still think that Mike Evans has himself a lot of potential upside here. And of course, will find himself getting a bunch of targets, a lot of red zone targets going in his direction, as I'm sure the Tampa Bay Buccaneers want a little bit of revenge based on the performance they put up this last week. Moving on to Marquise Brown, our number 12. Now, when we look back at last week, unfortunately, it wasn't a great game for him. But there's a couple key takeaways. 13 targets, that's incredible. And if you take into account that Lamar Jackson literally had no time to throw the ball because of how many blitz packages were sent in his direction. Of course, a wide receiver like Marquise Brown, who has made his living basically being a deep threat and, actually getting yardage and at least having a couple seconds for the quarterback to sit in the pocket, diagnose the defense, and then sling the ball 40 yards downfield. There just wasn't enough time to get the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands. And even when he did and he had opportunities deep, majority of, Marquise Brown's, potential receiving attempts resulted in defensive pass interferences, extra yards for his team, but obviously not for his overall total. Nonetheless, he takes on the Chicago Bears this week, giving up the 4th most points to opposing wide receivers. Just recently, Deebo Samuel, 6 catches, 171 against them. Mike Evans, 6 catches, 76 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. There's a lot of upside to be had here with a wide receiver that has been so consistent all season long. I'm not worried about last week's performance. I'm looking towards the future and a great week here in week 11. Moving on to the wide receiver 2 category, we begin with Keenan Allen. Again, Keenan Allen, number 13. As we've progressed throughout the year, we've seen multiple versions of Keenan Allen. First and foremost, the underutilized one, and then the one that was more touchdown dependent. And then we finally gotten to a position where we're finding 2020 Keenan Allen back in our lineups. A guy that in the last 3 weeks has seen a minimum of 11 targets every single game. When you're given set opportunities, of course, your baseline of production is always going to be there. The guy's had at least 70 receiving yards as well, has had a receiving touchdown. The performances he's putting together in the last couple weeks continues to just set him up for success. And there's nothing we need to do except for start him in our lineup. He takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and with the targets that were typically going to Mike Williams, going back in his direction, a matchup which should be more difficult to technically run the ball. I don't know if it will be, considering, somehow, some way the Pittsburgh Steelers are giving up 4.75 yards per carry. But if in fact they get down to the red zone and it is difficult for Austin Eckler to find the end zone, then Keenan Allen has kind of been that go-to as of late outside of the tight end position and should automatically be a fantastic play this week against Pittsburgh. Moving on, we have Michael Pittman Jr. Now, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video when I talked about matchups. Specifically, taking on the Buffalo Bills isn't the most exciting matchup of the week, but regardless, we've seen number 1 wide receivers find success against this team. Going back to last week, Corey Davis, 5 catches, 93. The week prior, Devontae Parker, 8 catches, 85. The week prior to that, A.J. Brown, 7 catches, 91. Number 1 wide receivers on the outside, whether it is garbage time or not, are going to find success against this team. And when we think about the potential of what, Michael Pittman is going to do or what he has done this season already, yes, in the last couple of weeks, he's found a lot of success, obviously coming off of a relatively underwhelming week in which he only had 9.6 fantasy points with 71 receiving yards. But I think to myself, it's always possible that he could score a touchdown. It's always possible he has an upside game, because it's not like the Buffalo Bills are immune to giving up points. They've given up 3 receiving touchdowns this year. It's possible. And I think if anybody's going to be able to do it, specifically in a matchup which a lot of the Buffalo efforts are going to be focused on trying to stop a Jonathan Taylor, that play action is going to open up, and Michael Pittman is going to be fantastic for us this week. Moving on to Diontae Johnson, number 15. Now, with Big Ben coming back, of course, it's going to make it a lot easier for Diontae Johnson to get easy points. A lot of the passes that Mason Rudolph was throwing, whether it was to Diontae, to Najee Harris, to Fryer Muth, to James Washington, a lot of them were extremely inaccurate, mainly because he didn't practice throughout the whole week. It was a late week switch of the quarterback position, as Big Ben Roethlisberger had to go to the IR. And regardless of that factor, Diontae Johnson still got himself 13 targets, 7 catches, 83 yards, unfortunately fumbled in overtime. Really could have locked down a victory for his team, but takes on the Los Angeles Chargers this week. In my opinion, typically, yes, matchups like this and Buffalo are the tougher ones amongst all wide receivers, but I'm not worried about it. With the opportunity that he's getting at the wide receiver position, with Big Ben coming back, with Claypool still missing, Diontae Johnson should very easily be 10-plus targets, maybe even closer to 15 than we anticipate. Moving on to Amari Cooper, our number 16. Again, when there is so much focus relied on covering the backfield and making sure that Ezekiel Elliott isn't taking over the game, and of course CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz, Amari Cooper oftentimes flies underneath the radar. And this upcoming week, they take on a matchup which, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the implied total in terms of total points scored in this game is about 55.5, 56 points on some sports books. Honestly, Vegas expects this to be a shootout. I expect it to be a shootout because you got 2 of the higher-powered offensive teams. When you have Patrick Mahomes on the other side finally finding his mojo, and you have Dak Prescott, who has been fantastic all season long with the weapons that surround him while he has been there. And even without Dak Prescott, we've seen Amari Cooper get himself over 100 receiving yards and have himself an incredible game. Should be an exciting one. And in my opinion, Amari Cooper, he's a wide receiver we're starting up, because if this is going to be one of those back-and-forth games, then of course Dak's going to be looking for security blankets, and certainly Amari Cooper is one of them. Moving on to our number 17, Tyler Lockett. Now, Lockett is specifically here because of the matchup against Arizona. There is no other indication from the last week's games besides the unbelievable amount of defensive pass interference calls and thrown interceptions from, of course, Russell Wilson that give me, some sort of confidence. Like, look, the fact that Russell Wilson's willing to throw the ball 40, 50 yards downfield to Tyler Lockett obviously gives me confidence because eventually Tyler Lockett will catch one of those like he did earlier this season and score touchdowns consistently. And, even though there are going to be some plays in which, the defensive pass interferences happen and you're not going to be credited for anything there, and at least that the opportunities are there. And that's great. Now, like I mentioned, the only reason I'm talking about Tyler Lockett in a number 17 capacity is because of the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona has given up the 22nd most points to opposing wide receivers. I talked about it with DK. It's not the greatest matchup, but they've given up 13 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers, and that is pretty good for someone like Tyler Lockett, who has made a living pretty much as of late against Arizona. Last season, his 2 performances against Arizona pretty much solidified himself a top 12 wide receiver standing. In the last 2 games that he's played against Arizona, the first one, 15 catches, 200 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns for 45.5 fantasy points. The second one, 9 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown, 17.1 fantasy points. I mean, by all means, Tyler Lockett is a fire-up guy because I don't really care. It's the Arizona matchup, and this is what he is made for, and they always want to focus in on him. So with Russell Wilson trying to get back to his comfort level, I think Tyler Lockett's the way to go. And that's probably where the ball is going to be going in the direction of, considering, again, Tyler Lockett had 8 targets last week. Didn't do much with them. I think they'll probably get to, close to 12 this week and find a lot of success with it. Moving on to Adam Thielen, our number 18. Look, Adam Thielen, I guess you can consider him touchdown dependent, but that's pretty much what he's been his whole, career. In the last 2 seasons here, going back to 2020, he had 14 total touchdowns. This season already started off hot. Prior to this last week, had 3 consecutive games of a receiving touchdown. Yes, he's been touchdown dependent, but a lot of wide receivers are, and I'm not going to take it away from him. I think he is a fantastic play against Green Bay this week. When Justin Jefferson begins to pull more coverage and pull more attention because he's dominating, it is only going to open it up more and more for Adam Thielen to find success. And that is why, being the Robin to Justin Jefferson's Batman is not a big deal, because in my opinion, it just means more fantasy points in that regard. That is why I'm firing him up as our number 18 for this upcoming week. Moving on to Jaylen Waddle, number 19, with Tua probably back at the starting quarterback position, considering, of course, he came in, had himself a great overall performance, helped that team win that game. It just means more targets going in the direction of Waddle. That is his favorite target, with Will Fuller injured still, with, of course, Devontae Parker injured still, with the lack of depth that they've had at the wide receiver position. Guys like Isaiah Ford, Matt Collins are stepping up on a weekly basis. Either way, I think Jaylen Waddle is the number 1A target in terms of just getting the ball to him on a downly basis. That is where the comfort level is. He even had an end zone fade on the outside. He wasn't even lining up in the slot position. Defensive pass interference call. Soon later they end up scoring, but not with Waddle. Either way, the opportunities are there. The targets are going to continue to grow. And, with Tua under center, I'm confident that Waddle's going to have himself a great game this upcoming week, specifically considering they play against the New York Jets. Moving on. DJ Moore's on number 20. Now, DJ Moore has Cam Newton most likely under center this upcoming week. If it is going to be some situation in which we don't see Cam Newton there, and in fact, we're going to see once again PJ Walker, then we'll downgrade DJ Moore. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they went ahead and they signed Cam Newton, and they gave him reps last week to get him back into it and get him ready for this upcoming week. So here's my expectation with DJ Moore. Playing against the Washington football team, it's the second easiest matchup at the wide receiver position. That's a plus. The fact that Mike Evans, 62 yards and a touchdown. We had Davante Adams, 76 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill, 76 yards and a touchdown. Callaway, 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. Considering we've seen number 1 outside receivers dominate against his defense in the last 4 consecutive weeks. Promising. And now we talk about the potential of what Cam Newton brings to the table. The deep ball has been missing out of DJ Moore's repertoire for the last couple weeks. And you cannot tell me that Cam Newton's going to be any worse than Sam Darnold has been in the last couple weeks. It's impossible for that to be the case. So, in this regard, especially going back to last week, one of the 7 targets that DJ Moore garnered last week was from Cam Newton, and it was a deep ball, 30 yards down the field, literally put it on, DJ Moore's face. Unfortunately, defensive pass interference, but if we're going to see Cam Newton throwing the ball with accuracy, a healthy shoulder, and a guy that is ready for some revenge, by all means, DJ Moore is the guy that he's going to be sending the ball to down the field. DeVonta Smith's our number 21. Now, I understand DeVonta Smith has been incredible. 2 back-to-back weeks of 20-plus fantasy points. And I understand that. This last week, 66 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. A week prior, of course, was it over 100 receiving yards and a touchdown? I get it. 3 touchdowns, 2 weeks. It's exciting. But he plays against New Orleans. And New Orleans, man, though they have given up some performances here and there throughout the year, they have really been good against number 1 wide receivers. And I think this is going to be a scenario in which we probably see DeVonta Smith take a little bit of a step backward, though it's not going to be something that is completely, destroying his overall potential this week. I think that touchdown upside is certainly going to be something that we have to keep an eye on. And if that's not there, then what are we potentially expecting? If we're going to get a game in which we're only going to get 5 receptions for 70 yards, we have to be prepared for that potential to occur, because touchdowns are ever so difficult to predict. And in a matchup against such a good defense, it could be something that may be missing this week. Either way, his talent is shining through regardless of what matchup he's faced. Hopefully, DeVonta Smith can surpass this number 21 spot and maybe put up 21 fantasy points this week and prove me wrong. Moving on, we have number 22, Brandin Cooks of the Houston Texans, taking on, at this point, when you play against the Tennessee Titans, regardless of which wide receiver it is, you're going to find success. I mean, this season already, the Tennessee Titans have given up 14 different performances of plus 70 yards to opposing wide receivers. That alone gives me confidence. The fact that Callaway and Traquan Smith are scoring touchdowns against that defense last week, unbelievable. On top of it, Traquan Smith had a touchdown, stepped with his toe out of bounds at the back of the end zone, could have had himself 2. Dante Harris had himself 84 receiving yards. These aren't premier wide receivers, but it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball, Trevor Siemian, doesn't matter who's catching the ball. It matters, is it just talent? And are you ready to just throw the ball against Tennessee? Because if you are, by all means, you're going to find success. Tyrod Taylor to Brandin Cooks, whether it is David Mills to Brandin Cooks, I believe there's a lot of success to be had there. This season already, Brandin Cooks has had more performances of 10-plus fantasy points than he's had less than 10 fantasy points. Not a lot of wide receivers, have accomplished that this year, and you can't say that about a lot of wide receivers. Either way, a great overall play coming off the bye week should be fantastic for us. Moving on to Terry McLaurin. Now, Terry McLaurin, can we trust him? No. Has he had way more, negative performances than positive? Absolutely. Does he have the potential to be great? Absolutely. What is potential if he doesn't act upon it? I understand the frustration. I can feel it. Listen, Terry McLaurin, any given week, can have a great performance. And you're wondering why I have him at 23 instead of 33. Mainly because he has incredible upside. Mainly because he's the number 1 wide receiver of his offense. And though he is not getting targets similar to a Diontae Johnson or a Justin Jefferson this last week, I get it. Maybe he's not getting those numbers, but eventually he will. And when everything kind of clicks into place, Terry McLaurin could very easily be a top 15 wide receiver, much less sitting at 23 here. I think there's a lot of potential to be had here. And if you can risk it, do it this week, because I think Carolina's matchup may be a higher scoring one between those two teams than a lot of people expect. Moving on to T. Higgins, our number 24. The last 3 games that T. Higgins has played, he's had a minimum of 4 receptions and 60 receiving yards. In a full PPR format, 10 points. Half PPR, 8 points. We'll take that. A baseline of 8 points with the potential touchdown upside or even more yardage upside that we've seen this season already kind of solidifies him at the back end of the wide receiver 2 conversation. The fact that he plays against the Las Vegas Raiders could be something of a difficulty, but if Casey Hayward is on the opposite side of the field dealing with Jamar Chase, maybe that opens up more for him this week. But my biggest concern with him isn't a matter of his opportunity. It's a matter of whether or not he can score that touchdown and get past that baseline performance and floor. This season already, we've already seen Mixon and Jamar Chase are going to be the number 1 and 2 touchdown options for this offense. After that, it's probably C.J. Uzomah after the last couple weeks of performances. Then and only then, it's probably T. Higgins. And unfortunately, that's going to be something that may leave him as a flex option, wide receiver 3 option. But hopefully, based on the fact that, of course, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon are pulling so much tension, he could end up having himself a great overall week here. Let's move on to the wide receiver 3 category, beginning with Mike Williams. Listen, I think Mike Williams is fantastic, but, I can't deal with it. It has just been too much stress, anger. I don't even know how to explain it. 5 out of the last 6 games, he has had less than or equal to 6 targets. That is nothing. I mean, literally anybody off the street can get 6 targets. And it hurts so much more considering he was averaging like 25 fantasy points per game in those 4 games prior when the season started. If he wasn't averaging 25 points per game, we wouldn't be so stressed about it. But dude, it has gotten to a point where he's beginning to trickle down and going back to the Mike Williams of old. Hopefully he'll find himself, but it's a matter of whether or not he's getting open, and Herbert's looking in his direction. Moving on to Corey Davis for number 26. Considering he's coming off his first week in the injury, gets himself 5 catches for 93 against Buffalo of all defenses. I think that's a fantastic game. 9.8 fantasy points regardless of who is at the quarterback position. Going against Miami this week, the third easiest matchup of the wide receiver position. I mean, it should be a game in which either Miami is dominating or both these teams are just scoring an unbelievable amount of points. I have a very low expectation in which it gets to a lower scoring game or there isn't garbage time for the Jets to get Corey Davis points. And that's pretty much all we're asking for. Garbage time, a couple opportunities here and there with a veteran quarterback, maybe even scores a touchdown. The potential is certainly there. Hunter Renfrow is our number 27. I talked about it in regards to many wide receivers today. Touchdown dependency is so ridiculous in fantasy football, and inconsistency is certainly there. I mean, we just talked about Michael Williams a couple minutes ago. The inconsistency of play is going to be there, but the question remains with Hunter Renfrow. Though he has been fantastic for the last 2 weeks scoring touchdowns, if he doesn't score a touchdown in a half PPR scoring format, where does that leave him? 7 catches, 46 yards. If he doesn't score a touchdown, where's his performance? It's not looking great, but luckily, he has been consistent as of late. He has scored points. He has gotten a great amount of targets, and we're going to have to lean in on that. And we're going to continue to play him and find a lot of success with his potential. Again, when they're down on the goal line, they're no longer looking for Josh Jacobs to run it in or Darren Waller. They're pretty much 100% of the time looking for that Hunter Renfrow out route, which was used in the national championship game against Alabama. You know, Deshaun Watson threw the out route to Hunter Renfrow. Boom, touchdown. They win the game. That's his bread and butter. And as long as they continue to get down in the red zone, I think the opportunity is certainly going to be there for Hunter Renfrow to score. And that just continues to build his overall fantasy value. Moving on to Christian Kirk. I do not expect DeAndre Hopkins to play. With that said, if Kyler Murray is not playing, then this is much more of a downgraded play than the current number of 28. So, with this said, if Kyler Murray is playing, he has an extremely high chance of being a great overall play, maybe even top 24 in this given week, because we know how much potential and upside Christian Kirk presents on a weekly basis. But if there is no Kyler, if there is no D-Hop, and he's pulling number 1 coverage, AJ Green hasn't showed up since the Thursday Night Football game, he would literally be the only threat on that defense and pretty much pulling majority of the attention of an opposing defense and their secondary, which would be tough. But hopefully Kyler's ready and can help Christian Kirk find some value this week. Moving on to Jarvis Landry. He came out and publicly said he's not getting enough targets. And I'm sure Baker Mayfield is willing to oblige. He doesn't want to have no wide receivers at the beginning of next season. So he's obviously going to look back to his number 1 target over the last couple of years, send the ball in Jarvis Landry's direction, especially considering they play against Detroit of all defenses. This should be a fantastic matchup in a game in which they're consistently winning, and hopefully them leading the game because of how dominant their running game is going to be isn't going to impede on the potential upside of Jarvis Landry. Hopefully he gets enough work early to constitute his overall start. Jakobi Meyers are number 30. He had his first career touchdown game last week, and it was crazy enough because Brian Hoyer threw that touchdown. Now, going into this upcoming week, Thursday night game tomorrow night against the Atlanta Falcons, giving up the 8th most points to opposing wide receivers. You may be thinking, why are we potentially starting Jakobi Meyers? Mainly because the Atlanta Falcons have had a tough time stopping slot wide receivers in the last couple weeks. I mean, mainly this last one, CeeDee Lamb going for those 25 fantasy points that he did. If we're going to see Jakobi Meyers, who has predominantly played in the slot position this season, dominate that position and continue to get targets going in his direction, I think there's a very good opportunity for him to have himself a great upside game against Atlanta this week. Number 31 is Rashod Bateman. In his first 4 career games with the Baltimore Ravens, this young man has had 28 total targets. I mean, that number is fantastic. 7 targets per game shouldn't be overlooked, especially in an offense that has so much potential upside for touchdowns. And with the running back position being in such flux, with 1 week it's Le'Veon Bell, 1 week it's Freeman, 1 week it's Tyson Williams, 1 week it's Latavius Murray, the wide receiver position and the fact that he is dominating in terms of snap counts. We saw very little utilization of a Sammy Watkins. It continues to build the potential momentum of Rashod Bateman playing against the fourth easiest matchup at the wide receiver position. I have a lot of potential hope that he's going to have himself another great game here as a number 31. 32 is Emmanuel Sanders, and 33 is Cole Beasley. Similar to the running back position for the Buffalo Bills yesterday, I'm going to combine both wide receivers for the Buffalo Bills this week. Emmanuel Sanders has had a lot of touchdown upside this season, early this season specifically. As of late, has fallen off. Is he worth the play? Mainly because they play Indianapolis, and the fact that Indianapolis cannot stop wide receivers, it is maybe an enticing matchup. But my only concern with Emmanuel Sanders is the fact that Gabriel Davis just had a game in which he had 3 catches for over 100 receiving yards. If Gabriel Davis is going to be more of that threat and be on the field more often, then maybe Emmanuel Sanders' upside is reduced, but hopefully it's not going to be the case this week in a very enticing matchup. On top of that, we move on to Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley in the last 3 weeks, prior to, of course, his last week in which he only had 2 targets and 2 catches, he had 25 targets in those 3 games. I mean, those 25 targets led to, 231 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. If this man is given opportunity and he's healthy, because I know he's been dealing with a rib injury, he's a fantastic play. It's just a matter of whether those things align, whether it's going to be a blowout or a competitive matchup that keeps him in the game and catching a bunch of those targets that are sent from Josh Allen. Moving on to Elijah Moore on number 34. Last week, I think I had Elijah Moore at number 37 on Sunday morning. Luckily, was able to score himself a garbage time touchdown with Joe Flacco. Luckily, Joe Flacco is starting this week. If they've already built a combination there and there's a little bit of a rapport being built, of course, last season, Joe Flacco played for the New York Jets. He found a lot of success, specifically with Jamison Crowder. If he's going to continue to look to the slot position and Elijah Moore is going to get more opportunity and exposure there, then by all means, it could be a great play this week against the Miami Dolphins defense. Then we move on to Kadarius Toney, our number 35. Though Kadarius Toney needs to still earn our trust back, if in fact he's healthy and playing and we are going to see a week in which Sterling Shepard is still dealing with an injury with his hamstring and quad that has been pretty much plaguing him the whole year, then Kadarius Toney is pretty much the number 1 receiving option in this offense, purely. Maybe Saquon could be if he's active, but I don't expect a guy like Golladay to get more targets than a Kadarius Toney. And though the last time we saw Kadarius Toney, he did literally nothing, I think those are anomaly kind of performances, and we'll get back to the days of Kadarius Toney dominating. Moving on to our final wide receiver option for this week, we have Robby Anderson. Robby Anderson. What are we going to do with you? Like I mentioned earlier with DJ Moore, Cam Newton cannot be as bad as what Sam Darnold was. Robby Anderson was seeing like 10 targets per game and only catching 3 of them per game because of how inaccurate and how terrible the overall offense was and the performances that Sam Darnold was putting forth. I think with Cam Newton already coming in, throwing a touchdown to Robby Anderson, the post-game press conference, the rapport that they already have and they've built, and now they take on the Washington football team. One of the easiest matchups at the wide receiver position, the second most points to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis this season. I think Robby Anderson could sneakily be a good play for us this week. All right, those are my Week 11 wide receiver rankings for the 2021 fantasy football season. Tomorrow we'll have quarterbacks and tight ends on the docket. Outside of that, thank you everybody for watching. Tomorrow night we will also have a live stream after the Thursday night football game between the New England Patriots and Atlanta Falcons. Thank you everybody for watching. Check out Underdog Fantasy if you haven't yet already. Use promo code Andrew today, and Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. Cannot thank you guys enough. And until next time, subscribe, click the like button. I'll see you. Peace.